Okay.
Can we start? Yes.
Okay. Please.
Okay, so we can start. And yesterday, this was a great lecture about uh, creativity. So today we will continue with the lecture about psychological imagination. And this is my good friend and colleague from Philippines, from University in Brno, and his expertise is in personality psychology. So we'll maybe he will maybe talk about this a little. Okay, thank you. It's yours.
Thank you, Katka. Okay, everybody for being here, even though it's very cold and very early. Um, let's start. So this project? Well, I've been thinking for a long time about this. I even uh, I even kind of pushed one of my graduate students to try to work on it because I think a lot of what we do in psychology, but also in related fields like social work or education, or various kinds of practice kind of work, where there might be part of it where you have to understand how another person works, why they're like that. Um, Especially maybe in, I don't know, for education, but probably if you're dealing with kind of a one-on-one kind of mentoring, maybe, or as Katka said, maybe if you're dealing with parents of children. Um, but in psychology, definitely, it's like there are entire fields and disciplines where the whole point is to try to understand and give an explanation why a person is like the way they are. Okay. And I've always been frustrated that even though we kind of are sort of not really, but kind of good at measuring things in psychology, um, we're not very good. I think or at least we don't yet have a good system for interpreting that data. We just we just mash them up together and think that the more data you have, the more the more correct you will be. But that's not true. So, and I'm frustrated that there's no one. I've been looking for an account of it. Uh, yeah. So I think I'm trying to fill the gap. So probably I'll write this up as a kind of uh, opinion paper someday. But yeah, I'm proposing that there are at least some basic level things you should try to do. I don't really know how like the details will work out, but I think there are basic level things, and I think no one is talking about them. So I want to just say them that you should do these simple things. Not well, kind of simple. Yeah, but yeah. Um, the thing is, so what this is what I'll try to cover. And as you can see, the first one is about sociology, because there is such a thing, and it's been an idea that existed for quite a long time called the sociological imagination. Knowing that's part of the inspiration for thinking about the psychological imagination. I'll talk about that in a while. And then I try to cover think like the basic stuff that I think you need in order to do the more complicated stuff. And I'll try to give a kind of very simplistic case, you know, and yeah, and then I'll go. I don't know if I really have time, but I want to talk about like the kind of criminal profiling that people say works and catches criminals, but doesn't really. So why does that fail? What is wrong with that? What can we learn about understanding persons from those kinds of things? Okay, just a caveat that yeah, like I said, this will focus on interpretation of data. I won't talk about like measurement, testing, how you do that. Well, let's just assume that you have good tests, you have good measures, you have good, like educational assessments or psychological assessments, that those work. The question is, after you have that, what do you do with it? And that's the thing that I'm trying to worry about in this lecture. So yeah, so the measurement part, I'm not gonna cover that. Okay, again, so meals. was the one who first talked about a sociological imagination. And what he was saying is that, of course, what do sociologists study? They study like big social forces, economies, revolutions, movements of people, politics, changes in people's values, etc., and so on and so forth. But Mills was saying, in order for you to actually understand how that works, you have to bring it to the level of individuals. How do you do that? Because these are big things, like economic trends or globalization. How do you bring that to the level of the individual? So what he's saying is like, um, we have to try to kind of connect those big trends with individual cases, maybe individual people or individual lives or stories. And in doing that, you're able to kind of see how, for example, globalization actually looks from the point of view of an ordinary person. Um, and he wants to say that you can look at the intersection of the various forces like politics, economics, international relations, and how they might show up in the life of, like, say, a bus driver. Okay, so you're using the life of a bus driver to kind of further understand these big things that you cannot see really from our point of view. You do not see the economy. You only read about reports about it, but the economy is not something you can see. You can, when you buy something, when you buy a loaf of bread from a person, that's not the economy. That's just a tiny, tiny part of it. So lots of things like politics, all of these things, we aren't able to see them, but still they're affecting us. They're changing us all the time. And Mills is saying, yeah, if you really understand how these big forces work, then you should be able to bring them to the level of the person and then try to explain, why is the bus driver angry? What is he angry about? Is it something related to, international relations or politics or whatever? So that's the idea from the sociological imagination. I think it's a good idea. I mean, in a way, it's a vague idea, but at the very least, they're talking about it in sociology. And the thing is, I've always wondered why we didn't have an equivalent in psychology. Where is the psychological imagination? What is it about, and how do you teach someone to have sociological imagination? Because sociologists talk about, when you train people to become sociologists, you're trying to encourage them to think with a sociological imagination. So this is training people. So they talk about this a lot, but in psychology, we assume that there is something similar to that psychologists need to do, but we don't talk about it, or no one has been, you know, uh, laying out what would be the good way and the bad way to do it. So that's my disappointment, and what that led to this lecture, or hopefully paper. Um, in order to, I think, the way I will make a parallel with sociological imagination is to use this idea from the philosopher Daniel Dennett. Um, if you Google Daniel Dennett, he's like, the Platonic ideal of white man philosopher. It's like bushy white beard and then very. So it's like, yeah. If there's a philosophy debate, is he the guy you want? So he had this idea of personal and subpersonal. Well, he doesn't give a lot of detail, I think, in his paper, and other people have taken it further and tried to, make further distinctions, definitions about it. But maybe a simple way to talk about it is that the personal are the things. To some extent, one simple way to talk about it is like, these are the conscious things that you do. But beyond that, these are the conscious explanations you have for the things you do. Meaning, so if later today you go off and you eat a burger, but yesterday you promise yourself, I'm not gonna eat a burger. I'm gonna eat something healthy. Like, I don't know, soup or something. Uh, Burger soup. Happy sheep, yeah, sure. And something healthy, but instead you went out and got a burger. So you can ask yourself, why did I do this? And maybe you have some explanation for yourself that because I was stressed, I needed the meat to calm me down, maybe, okay, to make me feel better, or I need something tasty so that I feel better about my day. So yeah, so it could be that you have that explanation. And that's something you could tell yourself. You could even write it down. So in a sense, it's something you can verbalize. You can talk about it. You can share it with someone else. That's a personal, meaning explanations that talk about the reasons of why you did something. And these reasons are usually things that you are aware of, or at least you can kind of conceptualize. The subpersonal are all those explanations that are not on this level of consciousness or verbalizability. Uh, so these are the kind of mechanisms that you don't really have much awareness of. I mean, if you could talk about the unconscious if you wanted to, say like psychoanalytic unconscious, but you don't have to. So meaning there are all sorts of non-conscious things that could be like psychoanalytic, could be not. So it's just talking about any of the mechanisms, like how do we just trap our body in space? How do we know that I am not too close to the table? Those kinds of things you don't have to think about those. Um, so it's like these kinds of things are just happening in the background. And but the thing, that the idea of Dennett was, he was saying that still you can actually talk about these mechanisms even though they're not conscious. You can talk about them having goals, even though it seems that it makes more sense that it's only persons who have goals. That okay, I have a goal today. I want to go to Smokoda and buy something there. That might be my goal. But the thing is, the mechanisms, you can talk about the mechanisms as having goals too. Like say, it could be that the goal of your memory system is to keep certain things stored. And it could fail that goal sometimes. That's why you might forget. Or it could be a goal, one of your systems, mechanisms, whatever it is. Maybe there's one that's keeping track of, say, we were talking about food. Like maybe there is a kind of system that makes you aware about whether you feel full or you feel not hungry, whatever. That's not something you can, easily control. It's just, it's just a feeling you have. And how does that work? You're not aware how that works. You're just aware of the effects. But that system that's keeping track of that, its goal is to kind of ensure that you are neither too hungry or too full or anything like that. Okay, so that system has a goal. It's a goal that you don't know at the personal level, meaning consciously you don't know, but that's happening. So meaning if I'm going to explain why, say, you ate a burger today instead of a healthy salad or soup, then I could invoke that because there are these non or some personal mechanisms you weren't aware of that kind of incentivized or motivated you to begin thinking more about burgers and maybe fantasizing about burgers as you're walking. So and you don't know whether it's sometimes you're not fully aware how suddenly you're just walking and maybe you're looking around, oh, a dog, oh, a dress. And now you're thinking about burgers. So you might not be aware how you got there, right? So it's like your train of thought just wanders around, and now you're thinking about burgers. The thing is, you didn't have to choose that topic. It could have been supplied by one of the mechanisms whose goal it is to kind of maybe make you want to eat a burger or for whatever reason. So that's the idea. Like you can talk about like goals or targets or intentions or states, both at the personal level, but you can also talk about it at the sub-personal level. And I think your job, if you are trying to understand people, is to try to connect these two things, even though Daniel did not actually specify if they were supposed to be connected. some other people have tried to theorize more on that, but I think that's the point of a psychological imagination, to connect these two things. So another kind of metaphor is like the personal is like the operating system of your computers, whereas the subpersonal is the code that runs it. You don't see this; you only see this. Okay, but they're intertwined. Okay? So and the idea is, in order to understand fully the person, you should understand both of these sides. Um, well, you can ask me like, well, AJ, if the subpersonal is so important like that, why can't we just study that and ignore the personal? And my answer to that would be yes, but the thing is, it's the personal. It's usually, and this is true in psychology, but this is probably also true in education. Even though you know what's happening at the subpersonal, usually the way you will intervene or help the person, like the child, is at the personal level. You have to talk to them. You have to explain things. You have to give reasons. So if you stick to this, there's really nothing much you can do to intervene. So meaning you need both. So that's a point. And that's where it parallels, or I hope it does, the sociological imagination that I was talking about earlier. Whereas sociology tries to connect the big factors outside you to the things inside you, to your life. This is the other way around. It's trying to connect the things inside you to your personal level life. Okay. And I think that should be the goal. And well, you can tell me whether that makes sense as a goal. Okay, so I will try out this very, very simplistic kind of case. So Anne, you can imagine her however you want. It's not like it's more like a thought experiment rather than going into details. So let's say that we have Anne. She seems extremely fond of going out with friends and hosting parties at home. So meaning these are things you could observe about her. She does not gamble or do extreme sports, but she likes to drive aggressively fast and has been in a few accidents. Seems like a consistent thing that she does. She often volunteers for charities and churches in her spare time. So just simple. We'll refer to this case from time to time to kind of illustrate the things I'm going to talk about. But so kind of maybe to stretch your psychological imagination in a way. So psychological imagination, I think we should be trying to do these things. Like I said, I'm trying to lay out like what are the important things you should be trying to do. Right now, I am kind of not so good at the fine details of how to do this, and I hope to think that through further. But maybe you have good ideas that can fill in the gaps that I have. But these are the things that I think at an abstract level you should be aiming for these. And not taking this seriously is how you get to like bad methods like criminal profiling stuff. Okay. So I'll talk about these one at a time. Okay, so the first thing is kind of very difficult philosophically. So is there such a thing as a true account of the person? Meaning, is there a real you that we're trying to find out? The thing is, I don't really have an answer to whether there is a real you. But the thing I think for most people who want to see what they're doing as sort of scientific, we kind of assume, even though we're aware that we might be wrong, that there is a real person we're trying to uncover, to understand, to see more about. Because not assuming that, it kind of makes it slightly not as like the motivation now disappears, and it's no different from writing fiction. You could write about a totally that's a different psychological imagination. That's not what I'm talking about. Like to just imagine a purely invented person. So that's something else. It requires some of the same like tools of thinking here, But definitely, if you're not assuming that you're trying to uncover something, it doesn't have to be ultimate truth, but just the assumption that, okay, the things we observe about this person might not be the full story. There might be something else. Um, and maybe we could determine whether those other things are true or false. So I'm talking about like truth and falsity rather than like big capital T truths. And I think that's all fine enough. You don't have to like be committed to the idea that, oh, there is some kind of real person hiding inside every person, and at someday, somehow in far future we will be able to uncover that. I don't really know whether that would be the case, but the thing is, I think you have to kind of have some belief that you're trying to understand something that's not just being invented by you. You need something real. And again, I'm going to put that in quotes because that's kind of tricky word, real. But at least from personally, that's how I operate as a scientist. I have to kind of assume that, or at least for my own sanity, I want to assume that there's something out there, and that's what I'm studying. Because if you reject that, I don't really think you can benefit from the things I'm going to say, because this all assumes that we're trying to look for things. And the fact is, if there's such a thing as a true account, that means you can be wrong. If there's no such thing as a true account, there's no way to be wrong. You just say anything you want. That's what you get from that kind of point of view. And I don't really like that. But we can talk about that more if in case you wanted. So I'll kind of slide that away. And now go to like I said, I think this is like the job to do for psychological imagination. If you're trying to understand another person, especially if they're very different from you. So yeah, so the idea that I tried to illustrate a while ago is like you're hopefully, and that's a trick. So how do you actually even study the subpersonal? In many ways, you can't even observe it or measure it. So that's a problem. But if you could, or at least the parts of the subpersonal that you maybe could access, um, you could use that information to maybe inform more your understanding of the person, even at the personal level. Uh, you'll have maybe more insights, and maybe you'll be able to explain things that you wouldn't be able to do if you just stayed at the personal level. I mean, you could do that. I mean, some theories in psychology are purely at the personal level. I would say nominate things like humanistic psychology theories are almost always they're staying at the level of, here are my reasons, here are my goals, here are my hopes. These are all at the personal level. Um, and I think you can classify theories in psychology as to how much subpersonal or personal they would have in terms of explanatory kind of. Um, yeah. So now we'll look at an example to make this more clear. So, like I said, this was one of the observations we were making about Anne. She is extremely fond of going out with friends and hosting parties at home. We could ask, of course, and that's the point of the psychological imagination. We should ask why. Why does she do that? One answer could be, why does she do that? Because she believes that friendship is the most important thing in life. And she could sincerely believe that. So, but it could be, so it's a question of whether at the same time or alternatively. It depends on like the actual case at hand. You probably want to investigate more, but it could be that she does sincerely believe that friendship is the most important thing in her life. But it could also be true that there are some, and this is now at the subpersonal level. There are some events that trigger in her a strong desire to seek social rewards. Meaning sometimes just being with people, especially if you're sensitive to such social rewards, that's pretty like enjoyable enough. This is something that varies between people, of course. So people who would be called extroverts would be the kind of people who just being around people is fun enough. Whereas people who are not like that, they might not get anything from that. So it could be that Anne really could be that maybe she just tells herself that the friendship is important to her, but really maybe it's something about the way she responds to other people or to social rewards. Meaning, it could be that the people she wants to be around doesn't necessarily have to be her friends. It could be anybody. It could be strangers, whatever. Um, but like I said, it's also possible that both are true at the same time. That she sincerely believes that friendship is important to her. And at the same time, a lot of what she does when she goes out, when she plans parties, that those are triggered by things that she feels that are influenced by events. Like if she reads about someone else's party, maybe they will feel, oh, I haven't had a party in a while, so maybe tomorrow I'll have one. So meaning it could be all sorts of things that she's not completely aware of. She might or might not be aware of, that is actually leading to these behaviors. Okay. But at the same time, she could actually believe, and maybe she observed in herself, wow, I really like people. Maybe friendship is important to me. Yeah, I'll say that. Friendship, meaning it could be actually it's the subpersonal that causes the behaviors, and then she looks back at her life. Wow, this is what I do. Probably really like friends. They're probably important to me. So I create my explanation at the personal level from the behaviors that were generated by subpersonal. I mean, I'm just giving you an example of how you might do it. It kind of depends on the theory you're using, and I'm not gonna tell you. Yeah, at this level, this is what I'm talking about. Is like meta theory. It's not even you kind of have to choose which theory of personality you want to use. For the meantime, because we don't really have a kind of Uber theory that covers everything. You can combine some of them or just choose one. But what I'm saying is, whatever it is, and hopefully it covers the subpersonal also, because like I said, some of these theories stay purely at the personal. So yeah, I'm telling you that if you have this theory, then this is what you should be trying to do, whatever the theory is. So this is kind of um, principles or a guide for using theories in a sense. But this is not a theory of personality. I'm not giving you a theory of personality. You'll have to, that's a whole different lecture. It's kind of difficult also. Yeah. So this is another thing you kind of, so these are kind of guides and tips. So aside from, saying that you should try to make connections between the personal and subpersonal. Um, I think you should watch out that you shouldn't be carried away or jump to conclusions about single events. Um, the metaphor for this is like, yeah, so it could be that there's like today it's like suddenly it's quite cold, okay, whereas last week it was kind of warmish. So someone could say, because they observe that, and say, oh, well, I guess this climate change thing is not real because it's quite cold today. So it's like you're drawing this big conclusion, generalization from this single event. And the thing is, that's totally the wrong way to do it, because when we're talking about the climate, we're talking about trends, not single events. We're talking about trends, patterns across huge amounts of time. Seeing a single event that contradicts that trend does nothing to the trend. If it's really a strong trend, there are always exceptions to trends. So that doesn't disprove the trend at all. And same thing goes, but this is the thing is, people kind of have this habit of when you see in the data that a person had some kind of like traumatic event or really painful event, that they will point to that and say that's the reason why they are the way they are. Okay, possible, but that's not necessarily always true. In fact, there's quite lots of research that says that true. Like important big events, marriage or graduating, etc., or bad events like someone, a dear loved one passing away. Those can influence your personality, but the general conclusion about that seems to be that it's not as big as we thought it would be, the effect on your personality, and it doesn't. Over time, it fades. you kind of return to your baseline with some time. It might take years actually, but it fades. So it's like it's you're jumping to conclusions when you immediately assume, and maybe also because the person themselves says that they believe it's this event, this thing had happened to me, that's why I'm the way I am. And of course that's very believable. They might be really genuine and sincere in saying that, and that might be true sometimes. Sometimes it's not. So you have to be able to tell the difference. You shouldn't just immediately assume that since there's this big event and then this is the way she acts now. The way she acts now is because of that big event. So an example to make this clearer. So like I said, like Anne tends to have like she kind of drives fast, maybe dangerously risky driving. So she has accidents. And maybe let's say that Anne thinks a car accident, one of the car accidents maybe, or maybe the latest one, okay, made her appreciate life more. So she volunteers, meaning this is her explanation for why, as I told you earlier, one of the facts about her is she volunteers in charities and churches, okay, and she thinks this is the reason, okay. But the thing is, unless you really have good evidence for this, that's not really enough. Not even if Annie herself tells you that she thinks this is the case, because like what I said about sociology, that from our point of view, we can't see the economy. It's not something you can see from a single person's point of view, or just politics or globalization. Those are abstract things that you can only see at once you look at patterns, trends. Same thing is true, I think, for psychology. We cannot see, especially the subpersonal level, but even at the personal level, we don't remember everything that we've done or thought. It could be that I was thinking this way 1 year ago, and now I've changed my mind, but I don't remember that I changed my mind. I feel like I've always thought this way. And that's even just the personal level. So it's like, it could be true that what Anna thinks is the reason she volunteers is true, but your task as someone trying to interpret persons is to ask more, to ask, well, aside from this possible explanation, are there others? Let's look at possible other personal level explanations. Does she have other things going on in her life that might influence her choice of volunteering, or even the kind of volunteering she does? Like, why would she choose churches? Is she religious? But at the same time, you should ask, like at the subpersonal level, are there other things that she gets out of volunteering that is not necessarily like just helping? Okay, so maybe I'll give you a few seconds to just think about that. Like, think of Anne. Let's say that she's sincere, that she thinks she volunteers for a good reason, but maybe there are other reasons also and motivations why she's doing it. So I just think I'm not gonna ask you to speak up. I'll just reflect on it, and then I'll give you one example of possible things. Okay, so it could be, so one possible hypothesis you could formulate is that remember that she likes being around people. She seeks it. Maybe if we have that subpersonal level theory that explains why she seeks people, then we can use that. And the thing is, we can say that could be Anne is mainly after being around people when she volunteers. That's the reason why she seeks out volunteer work. She wants to meet new people. Maybe she's not fully aware that that's what she wants, but that's what she does anyway. And maybe part of the reason why she doesn't always stick around, oh well, I'm going to say that I think later. She doesn't always stick around in the volunteering is because the tasks she's assigned to are not social. Maybe in one volunteering work, she's just told, go to the warehouse and stock boxes. So, and that's not, that might not be appealing to her. And if there's a pattern where if it's not a social task, she leaves the volunteering, then it makes you even more suspect that it's true that she has this motivation. at some level that it's all about being around people or meeting new people. So that's one. That's one of the many possible kind of explanations. And I think it's in a way you can say that possible explanations are infinite. Supposedly, a good theory will limit your choices of explanations. That's what a good theory should be able to do. Well, where are those good theories? I'm not going to tell you because I don't know, but that's supposedly what good theories do. So you're not just saying any explanation is a good explanation. No. If you have a good theory, there are only things that make sense within the theory and others that do not. So you actually, the job is not impossible, meaning there are only a set of possibilities, hypotheses, and now you can try them out to explain Anna. Maybe in order to try them out, you seek further data, talk to Anna more, talk to the people who know her, observe her, things like that. And then you can get to one at a time, take out the possibilities until only one is left. Okay. So this one is, yeah, I think the point here is, even though like it's because we're very used to reading or watching about people in, say, novels, movies, and in stories. Usually people are much more consistent than they are in real life, meaning all of their characteristics or their actions seem to align. Of course, in more complex novels, in like, more literary works, there is much more complexity, there's much more inconsistency, and that's part of like the tension or the conflict or interest of the book comes from that. And the thing is, you should be quite aware that a real person, all of the things they do don't have to really align. That's perfectly possible for a real person. Sometimes they say something, but they will do another. Okay. Sometimes they say this, and then tomorrow they will say this totally opposite thing. It's not impossible. They're not crazy. That's kind of normal for lots of people. Some people probably are more consistent than others. That by itself is something interesting to try to explain. Why is this person more consistent? But the thing is, yeah, real persons are messy. Data is messy for real person. So, but the thing is that it's not as if there is no consistency. The consistency you should see is not in the data, but in terms of your explanations. Your explanations should be consistent. Meaning the underlying theory you are trying to give about, say, Anne, okay, should be internally consistent. It should make sense. It should all line up. Okay, and if it's a good explanation of her what she does, it will explain both the consistent and inconsistent things that she does. That's what a good theory does. It explains even the exception. Um, so here's again, we're visiting the volunteer work that Anne does. So I was, anticipating it already. So she loses interest. Okay. So you can ask, therefore, is Anne sincere about this, or does she have other motives? So I've already asked that. So yeah, so meaning it could be both. It could be one of those. It could be just that, she really does care about people, or it could be that, yeah, it could be like she really does care about people, but then her kind of values or ideology or whatever it is kind of switches from time to time. Maybe once she talks to some person, they become convinced, oh, yeah, volunteering is bad. I'm not going to do that. And maybe next week they watch some documentary and they learn about, oh, wow, it's so, I really need to help people. So could be that, it could be something like that instead. But it could be, it's more something at some other level, at the subpersonal. Like I said, it could be that her real motive is because she likes being around people. So as long as your explanation is consistent and it can explain the variations, like, yeah, that motive of saying that she actually just likes to be around people explains both the kinds maybe of volunteer work she looks for, why she leaves, when she becomes interested. Maybe you also see pattern like if her friends volunteer, she will volunteer too. Okay, so that gives you more evidence that what Anne's real motives are. And even though all of that looks like from the surface, all of that looks like messy and Anne keeps changing her mind, No, the underlying theory explains both her changes of mind and like the things that stay the same about her. And that's what you want. Okay. Not trying to make the data neat by throwing out data that doesn't fit. That's a bad habit. It's more like your explanation should be consistent. Yeah, one of the things I said that is kind of a goal is the idea of being lifelike. And the technical term is kind of verisimilitude, meaning the explanation you create about Anne is kind of, when you read it, it's very convincing and feels like a real person. It feels like you're reading about a real person. I mean, some people who write about how to make theories in psychology, some of them say that this is something you should aim for, like verisimilitude. Your theories should kind of mirror in some way or should align with what you see in real life. Even when it's something very abstract, like some kind of cognitive theories, still there should be some connection that you can see how your theory mirrors what happens in real life. And therefore it's believable, it's lifelike, it has verisimilitude. But the thing is, yeah, that's why this is a question. I'm not really sure what I can say about it at the moment. Like, I don't know. I agree that it's important, but I don't quite know whether it's a separate thing. It could be that once you fulfill the other things and maybe some other things that I haven't mentioned, you get verisimilitude as the bonus. Maybe it's not something you should aim for. It just comes out when you do it well. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I just want to mention this because some other people who write about, how should you create theories in psychology, how should you think about theories, they do talk about this. And yeah, right now I'm not yet totally clear about what I want to say about it. So maybe you can kind of think it through better than me. And so yeah, I was saying that right now we don't really have like fully and satisfying complete theories of personality, which are the theories you need if you're trying to explain persons. Some people therefore point to like psychology, like other social sciences, as something that's not really like science yet. And this is like invoking the concept of paradigm from Thomas Kuhn. The idea that, mature sciences have this kind of paradigm. It's a kind of background idea. Sometimes it's not even taught to students, like physics, certain kinds of assumptions like determinism. Most physicists would believe in some form of determinism, even if they're quantum physicists. But that's not a philosophy that you will learn in the physics class. You just absorb it from your professors, whatever. And, and the claim is in psychology we don't have these single dominant paradigms. We have a bunch of various smaller ones. And that's why some people say that psychology, like other things like psychology, is a kind of pre-paradigmatic thing. It's on the way to a paradigm, but not yet there. So there isn't any kind of big equivalent of like theory of everything in physics. But what we have is like people are beginning to attempt to go beyond the old 20th century theories, all the past theories, and create better integrative theories. So here are 3 examples of things that I've encountered so far. De Young's theory in particular looks like it's very congenial to the idea of having a personal and subpersonal, because he really goes into detail of how to explain like at subpersonal level. But all of these. So these are attempts. You don't really know. I mean, you don't even know how you will test these theories. But it's better than sticking with like the old small kind of theories or yeah. So these are like better alternatives than maybe the usual theories you would find in personal psychology. And if you were, like I said, you need a theory if you're gonna make the psychological imagination thing work. And I don't really have anything to offer you, but you can look around. So yeah. Meaning I'm not confident enough to say that, De Young is really the right one. I don't know. So now I'll come to, maybe just very quickly, the idea of, what is the example of the psychological imagination done badly when it doesn't work? So there is such a thing as like criminal profiling. It's kind of, I don't know whether it's big in Europe at all. It's more, it seems like literature is mainly from the US. But the idea is like, there's a crime. Supposedly, people record details of the crime. And from the details of the crime, like how it was done, the features of the crime scene, supposedly you're going to predict the profile of the criminal. You're gonna predict, based on the way they held the knife, they're probably an extrovert. Wow. It would be nice if that actually worked. So that's the idea. But yeah, I think that it, and I mean there are plenty of recent reviews you can read that explains why it doesn't work. But there's the evidence that it works is not very good. I don't know whether you can improve it, right? But right now there's not very good evidence for it. So, and I think the reason why it's not very good is it misunderstands how you kind of infer things about people. It's trying to do something kind of backward from what we usually do in psychology. So in psychology, you might say that maybe I give you a personality test, then I would find out that you're an extrovert. And then from that, I might predict like, okay, maybe there's a high likelihood in the future that you might do this or that. Okay. So meaning I'm using your personality features to kind of predict what you might do, but it's not very specific. That's what we do in psychology, and that makes sense. What the criminal profilers are doing is the opposite. They're taking a single event and extrapolating back to what kind of personality that came from. I don't really understand how they think that would work, because that's not the way things work. My metaphor for that is like as a thought experiment. You can imagine. So what if you wake up in a room, unfamiliar room, you don't know where you are. It's just a room with a window on the ceiling, and that's all there is. You can just see the sky. Plus, you have a range of weather instruments, like things that measure temperature, a barometer for measuring air pressure, and maybe another that measures wind speed. So it's a strange room. You're locked there. You can't escape. All you can see is the sky. And then all of these measurements. And what if the challenge is, okay, based on your observation of what the weather looks like, can you predict which country you're in? Okay. Maybe if the weather is strange enough and only happens in that particular place, you'll succeed. But the thing is, if I say, oh, it seems high humidity, 30 degrees, 31, no. Do you immediately know which country that is? It could be anywhere. Meaning, because climate, the way climate works is like personality. Like climate, like personality, it kind of shifts from time to time. But there is like a general trend. Okay? And the thing is, sometimes even in Brno, as I know for sure since I lived there for a few years, that it can get as hot as the Philippines on some months. And the thing is, if I were in this room and I were in Brno and I made those measurements, I might think, maybe I'm back home. If someone teleported me back home, how would I know? Because extrapolating from weather, what the climate is, see how that makes sense. But that's what they're trying to do. So yeah, so it's a kind of simplistic idea. But the bad thing is, like, some people think that you can do the same thing with like assessments of people, or maybe therapy or work, or maybe even educational assessments. Meaning you have to be careful. This is all about cognitive biases. I'll mention cognitive bias in a bit. But do not jump to conclusions. Persons are complex. Looking for the simplest explanation, sometimes it would be correct, but probably you would be wrong a lot of the time. So that's the vice that many people who engage in interpreting persons and claim to be able to do it from tiny amounts of data, like, oh, I just I'm just gonna watch their micro expressions on TV, and I will know what kind of person they are. Doesn't work. Yeah. So like I said, there maybe I'll talk about this more if in case you wanted to, but there are all sorts of biases at play. People are seeking convenient explanations. And the thing is, that's why I wanted to say that you should have an attitude that you're seeking true things. Because absent that, why not just make up things? If there's no such thing as like the correct assessment or interpretation, then who cares what I say? So I don't think that's a good uh, attitude towards understanding people. So if you take it seriously and you think there is a way of failing to do it correctly, then you have to avoid biases because that's the way you will fail usually. Because you immediately something, there's this event. And then now they look like this. Clearly it's the event that did this. Who knows? Have you actually checked whether that's true? Okay, so let's wrap up. Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to cover the basic principles. Uh, if you wanted me to walk you through how to do it, we would have to pick a theory and then make that work and try to explore all the various possible explanations that the theory would generate. So that would be maybe a future lecture, but yeah, you'll have to choose in a sense, theory or theories in combination. So that's the task. Um, and that's it. Thank you very much.
So if you have questions for AJ.
Yeah. Oh, just if you wanted the slides, the entire set of slides will be found here. And supposedly there's going to be recording, but any thoughts on questions? Does this seem to be this might this relate to what you might do in the future? No. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the subpersonal theory, which it should be like, if there should be like those big instincts like the sexuality, social ability, I don't know,
Yeah.
seeking for safety or like that. And my other thought was about should the subpersonal theory about big forces, or it be about a lot of smaller ones?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can say to that is really it depends on the theory. If your theory invokes like big things, imagine if the theory you're gonna use is some kind of evolutionary theory, then you're invoking like tendencies, evolved tendency was whatever. Whereas if your theory is something like a very detailed at the detailed level of say specifying, you know, your positive response to like different kinds of situations and maybe whether you seek them out again, whether you're sensitive to reward. Yeah, it kind of depends on the theory. So there's no one way to answer that question. Yeah. And yeah, and like I said, it's kind of beyond me right now to tell you which theory you should go for. I don't. I wish I knew.
Are inclined to some way to some theory?
Like I said, I would prefer to work with the newer integrative theories,
Yeah,
like the three examples over there. I think Epstein's theory, even though it's older, it didn't really kind of become popular. I found it very interesting because he was trying to cognitivize psychoanalytic theory. So that was like very, intellectually interesting. I don't know what is happening with it, but yeah. But the young one is like has a lot more detail, and therefore that's good, especially for like subpersonal stuff. So that's right now. That's what I can say.
Your issues to mostly people or the students here are educated to be teachers or educators. So it's kind of very necessary task to meet the people and think about them, recognize all the levels,
Yes.
but they are not psychologists.
Yes,
So
definitely.
observation and maybe the interview, there are only two tasks. And teachers are not so deeply into the psychological or personal theories. So how to do that, to recognize people even better. Those like recent theories you introduced, it's good to understand them better, and you think so far for teachers it could be kind of more clear then to recognize the others people's in the past.
The series I cited, I think they're not at the level where you can apply or practice them yet. They're like very, very abstract. So this is kind of like, and this is the one of the examples they gave to Katka also like, the thing is, for many, and I said this like, I think a while ago, that for many of the things we want to do, possibly the personal level is enough, especially if you're trying to do practical things. This is like the analogy of, if your car breaks down, you do not call Masaryk University looking for a quantum physicist. It might be that the quantum physicist knows nothing about cars. So what you want when your car breaks down is not a physicist, but a car mechanic. Car mechanic has all the tools and also all of the like applied theory part of fixing a car. Whereas a quantum physicist might know a car in the abstract, to joke about, assume a spherical car, like you would have in like physics class. So meaning they're in, and that's a separate skill. But I think you can have a kind of psychological imagination that is more on the personal level, especially if you're trying to work with not a lot of information. Like, you can only talk to them. It's not like you're bringing them to the laboratory and measuring them. So it's more the information is from talking to them. Maybe you have some performance in class. Probably you could apply, like I said, it kind of depends. The examples I was giving are trying to explain personalities. That's why you would use this framework with a personality theory. But you can imagine that if you have a good like pedagogical theory, okay, maybe you can make this work with that. And probably you should tell me whether that makes sense. But that would be interesting. I assume it would be very much more at the personal level.
I just remember one of your slides with the pen case that you said that's the only thing we can do. I was asking.
Maybe the main thing from this lecture is that like you should always ask why, and you should not stop at your first answer, because usually, or
You should not stop.
at your first answer, like why is I like that? Oh, I think like this. Maybe, but think more. Maybe that's not yet.
Kind of never-ending process.
Yeah,
With the pupils in the classroom, and if you are a class teacher, you stay with kids for 2, 3, 4 years.
Yes,
Because they are changing. As you said, the sociological circumstances are changing. So
Yes.
Yes, but maybe it's about the seeking patterns, like the climate in the
yeah,
in the
and it's good that if you can follow them across years, you have more patterns to work with, and that's the important thing. Rather than maybe because it's tempting, and sometimes it's not wrong that something happened to the child, and then now they're different. And sometimes that happens, but we should resist that as the easy explanation and maybe explore other explanations, especially if you are the kind of teacher where you've seen them for maybe 2 or 3 years. You kind of compare. This is the way they are usually. Does it really make sense that just because this one thing happened to them, now they're a totally different? Something like that. So that I think that's the way this might work in actual practice, but that's not something I've thought a lot about, and I'd be happy to, you know, if people here think that's true, I think that's really useful.
And what about if you are a teacher who teaching child for 3 years, for example, or 5 years, and you become a numb for this imagination? You get used to the personality of the child, so you lose the details of the patterns.
That's
Like
good.
how to deal with that?
A good. I don't actually. Is there a way for you to get a colleague also to check with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
It's just the idea.
Because that's a good that's a real problem. It's like you would now have certain specific biases towards the kids.
Or as you said, on my personal level, I can forget some stuff about myself because, I forget that I choose to do this that way. So what if I forget or don't see these details on some personal levels of the child? Because it can happen to me. I think it can happen to my process of psychological imagination to other people.
Yeah, this is the measurement in a sense, and then, like I said, it's kind of totally different problem. Like how do you yeah, of course, in a classroom, which things should you try to capture, record, or note down? Which things can you ignore? Because you can't record everything. Like even if you could, how would you even use that data? Like everything about everything. So it might be a waste of time. So I'm sure that as part of training teachers, the idea is some things you should look out for. There are some kinds of signs or certain kinds of behaviors, whereas others might not mean too much. And you would know better than me which those are. And assuming that you're able to do that kind of recording, monitoring, measuring well, then you shouldn't need to worry too much about. I mean, because you always have error, and sometimes forgetting is part of the problem. So yeah, it's not like there's a solution for that. But yeah, if you're doing it correctly, your observations and monitoring of children in school in the class, you kind of have to believe that it should work on average, and that's the best we can do. It's not like it will work all the time. It will work on the average and maybe at least give a little bit of extra insight to the teacher where they would find something. Like I think there's people there are a bunch of Icofried in Netherlands. What they're doing is like creating for schools like an early warning monitoring system for depression. So I assume, I don't really know the details, but I assume like they're monitoring, maybe they're recording stuff, and then they're looking at patterns. And then if certain patterns begin to emerge, they might say, okay, there's something happening with this kid. Maybe we should, invite him to a talk or something. So yeah, so that's the measurement side. So you can make that as sophisticated as you wanted. And yeah, but then still, the interpretation side is totally separate.
So
you could have excellent data, but your interpretation bad.
So the answer is the consistency of the climate.
Yeah. That's why I like the analogy of personality and climate. It fits very well.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for that.
And it also is my hope that we get better at personality psychology, like the climate scientists got better. That happened in just 100 years, and they're very good. So So maybe one more 100 year, we'll get there. Okay. Yeah, yes. Well, I probably will try to live in a university that's very high. Switzerland, maybe. Okay, okay.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, the recording. I don't know if there was anybody.
There wasn't. There weren't because they wrote to me. They
Ah, okay,
are
okay.
not able to get there.
I just stop it.
Yeah.